All right, well, welcome everybody to our North Metro Huddle Up for this week. It's glad to have you all here and joining, and I'm excited for another week of just being able to share God's word and talk to another awesome young athlete who's making a difference in his community. So let's welcome in Mac here. And Mac, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself really quick? Give a quick background of like what I know you graduated from Anoka, I post that, but what you graduated with Concordia, your degree and all that, and we'll get into some more stuff, but introduce yourself really quick.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Mac, and first off, I'd like to thank Zach for inviting me on to share with you guys. I met him doing the FCA Huddle, leading Anoka a couple of years ago. And so a little bit background around me is I grew up in Lakeville, down south in Minnesota, and then actually moved up to the North Metro my junior year of high school. And so I was homeschooled up until 11th grade. And in my final 2 years of high school, I did PSEO. And so I actually just graduated college a couple of weeks ago at age 19. And it's kind of a whole God story of how I was even able to play in college and play at the university that I wanted to. And so now I'm about to start my professional career here in the summer.
Very cool. All right. Well, as we get into talking about your background a little bit, before we do that, let's pray and just invite the Holy Spirit to join us here. So, Lord God, I just welcome you to this place, into our online chat, and I just pray that you bless the conversation that we're about to have and the words that Mac brings today, and I just pray that it speaks to all of us here as we gather. We pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So as you said, Mac, I know I met you at Anoka. I just was blown away by the work you did. Actually, Mac was really instrumental in helping us get the huddle started at Anoka High School. Was a great leader for us. But Mac, talk about, we'll get to your faith story in a little bit, but just talk about your playing career in sports and what did you grow up playing? I know you're big into basketball, obviously, but what's your playing career like?
Okay, so I started out kind of playing a little bit of everything. So I started out playing soccer, baseball, really liked football at a young age. And my mom actually made me try out one night for basketball, and it was in 5th grade, and I knew nothing about basketball. And so we YouTube quick five-minute YouTube video, how to play basketball, went to tryouts, and then I loved it ever since. So I grew up playing lots of different sports, but in high school, I just focused on basketball. At Anoka, couple highlights of my career are just getting to know the people around me, getting put into a brand new environment that I wasn't used to growing up. And so having to adapt in different things like that. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to play at Concordia St. Paul then after high school. And I was a walk-on, so I didn't get any scholarship money to play. And I was never the biggest guy, never the fastest, strongest, but I could always think the game, and I always did the little bit extra that other people weren't willing to do. And so I didn't get a lot of playing time my one and done year at Concordia. But, day in and day out, I did the little things the right way. And so that actually helped me to be able to earn a starting position one game. But it was midway through the season, and it was a real game. It wasn't just like a beginning exhibition game. And so I was able to step up and actually start in a game as a walk-on in one of the toughest conferences of Division II basketball in the country, and as a freshman. And so that wasn't as necessarily a testament to me and my skill set, but just of what you can do and what you can do to overcome. And so I just had great career, had fun with my one and done year. So
that's awesome. Do you have any, well, talk about your start that you had. Like, what were some things you remember? Were there some highlights, big shots that you had or anything?
There weren't necessarily like huge highlights. We ended up losing the game, which was a bummer. I made a couple shots here or there, but I, you know, I came into the game. I was taught by a couple of mentors is always envision yourself in the game, envision where you want to go in life. And so I've been doing that for years. And when I got into my first college start, it was very surreal, but I was calm, cool, and collected. And so I didn't make barely any mistakes. And so doing that, and I'll never forget what my coach said in the locker room after the game. We ended up losing, which was a bummer, but he said, Mac, I don't know anyone else I could have asked in this locker room to step up and did what you did and play to the level that you played. And so it just goes to the testament of, if you put in the work and you're willing to do the uncommon things, you can get to the places in life where you want to go. So those were probably a little bit of the things that I learned through that game.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that term uncommon. We heard that Tony Dungy uses that a lot. I know a lot of coaches use that, but it's in a lot of ways it's what Jesus calls us to do, right? I mean, uncommon. That's the way he lived his life, was so countercultural or uncommon. So I love that. So speaking of that, let's get into your faith story a little bit and just talk about like how you came to Christ, and just early parts of your faith story.
Okay, so I grew up in a very Christ-centered home, so I didn't have a lot to overcome in my youth. But the one funny story is when I was a little kid, I thought like you had to get saved every single week at church, so I always said the prayer over and over, and I legitimately thought I wouldn't go to heaven if I did that. So then once my parents learned, because I came home with a little booklet that they gave you every week, and then they're like, no, you only got to do it once. So that was kind of the beginning story. So I was brought up in a very loving household. But one thing as I grew into my high school years is I was homeschooled. So I was kind of the outsider of the group, whenever I played sports, whenever I was at my church actually had a private school. So there was a lot of not necessarily cliques, but just a lot of friend groups who were close together. And so I wasn't able to, I guess, be in them as well. And so just having that aspect, that was kind of hard to overcome. And just realizing like as I grew into my high school years and realizing like as a freshman and sophomore that, I have to make my own decisions rather than my parents making all the decisions for myself. You kind of grow up and kind of realize that, I have to take my faith for myself as well, rather than just relying on your parents to do it for you, or, your siblings or your friends to keep you in the habit of, having the mind of Christ. And so it was kind of a difficult season for me to try to balance those things out with having a couple of changes in my life. But I think the biggest thing I think was I made it my own. And so many people that I know who've kind of fallen off the path, I guess, is they didn't really make it their own. They were just kind of relying on other people around them. And so that's where I'm glad I made that decision kind of in the middle of my high school career.
So what are some things that you did or that you do? You mentioned making it your own. And the cool thing about, a relationship with Jesus Christ is it doesn't look the same for every single person. There's some certain things obviously that we're all called to do, be in scripture and be in prayer. But what were the things that you did that really helped give you that foundation? Were there some specific things?
Yeah, so a couple of specific things I did was I regularly attended church. I know like I made that a priority, and as you get busier in life, like as you get later on in life, you realize really how much time less time you really think you have. And so actually making it a priority to go to church, that's a big thing. Secondly is what I listen to. So I chose personally not to listen to any music with like profanity or anything like that. So mainly, even if I do listen to like rap music or like hype music to get me pumped up for a game, I just have it clean. And so that's just my personal preference, is I wanted to protect my mind and what was going into it, because I know there's a lot of things that can kind of come at your mind. And really your mindset is kind of one of your biggest assets, but it can also be one of your biggest allies. And so what you feed your mind, that's what will end up producing in your heart, and then ends up coming out in your actions and in your life, really. And so I just made it a priority to try to protect my mind, and also the power of association. So it's known that the 5 people you hang around the most, those are the most likely people you will become. That's most likely the person you will become later on. And so I chose to, really protect my association and where I was, who I was hanging out with. In college, I chose not to go to any parties, anything like that. And I personally believe I made a humongous impact on my teammates and the culture around me. And yeah, people go to parties and they don't drink. They can make that decision not to do and partake in those type of things. But just totally cutting that out, I think there was people who I talked to who did go to parties, and they're like, wow, I respect you for doing that, for actually standing up for something that you believe in. And so you guys never know the impact you'll make by just making those little decisions in your life.
Man, you were bringing it. Good job.
Thank you.
There's so much truth in the things that you just said, and I was just thinking about the same thing when you were talking and then you said it, but community is so important, and having a healthy community of believers and of accountability people, and that starts with who your friends are, and you mentioned that. So, I love that. I think that's a really, really important thing. So thank you for that. So you kind of are hinting at it a little bit too, some of the decisions that you made, but one of the things I always like to ask when we do these interviews is then how did your faith impact you as a college athlete, or as an athlete in general? You've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but are there other things that your faith impacted that you haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, so my faith has influenced my sporting career tremendously. I can almost guarantee I wouldn't have been able to play at Concordia St. Paul if it wasn't for God opening doors and me kind of staying faithful. I had a lot of opportunities to do distracting things in high school and in college, but I knew in the end it wasn't going to be as fulfilling. By talking to different people who have gone down the path that I currently have gone down. And so it's just I knew I didn't want to do those things because first of all, I could hurt my academics. So academics was a big thing, a big priority for me. Second of all, I could hurt my relationships. And so the relationships around me is also a big important thing to me. And so it also can hurt your playing career. So just as an example, I know a couple of people in my life, not at Concordia, but who played, and so they ended up making a couple bad decisions off the court, and that cost them their whole entire college playing career. It's these little things that people chose to do, and maybe they did it once or twice and it didn't hurt them, but down the road, after they kept on doing it, it actually ended up causing them a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil. And so just realizing that in the end, even by doing those things, they aren't fulfilling anyway. So why do them if they're going to keep you from what God has planned for you?
Sorry, I had trouble unmuting.
No, you're good.
That's awesome. I'm curious, those 2 people that you talked about that their careers were ruined, did you have an opportunity to speak to either one of them about that? Or
I was able to speak to them about it. They're adults now.
Okay.
And so just hearing different stories about, man, I wish I could have done this differently, or I wish some of them was one of them. I know a couple of people it was an injury, and because of the injury that led them down a path that they shouldn't have gone down. And so just different things like that. It's the little decisions that they made in the beginning that they wish they wouldn't have done that led to something way bigger in the end. to ultimately lead to where they couldn't do it their sport anymore.
So are there other things you talk about protecting your heart, right? And making sure that you're careful of what you're feeding. That was a really good point. We actually talked about that in one of our huddles last week, even related to this, the COVID stuff. Like if we're continuing to feed our frustrations or our, anger about shelter in place and things like that, that's what's going to come out then, right? And instead we need to be feeding our hope in Christ and our faith in Christ. So are there other things right now, you're talking about how you're transitioning now into your professional career. So in this point in your life, are there other things that you're doing to make sure that you're feeding your faith and feeding your relationship with God?
Yeah, so one thing that I never did as a kid was read. And so I just despised reading. I did not like reading. But my older brother, he was actually always a big reader. He's been a big writer and everything. And just this past year or so, I started actually picking up the habit of reading. And I'd say reading has been a big key for me to help just keep my mind focused on the right things. Because if I spend, and I'm guilty of it sometimes, I spend too much time on social media. But you hear the words like comparison is the thief of all joy. And it's just so much that I'll be scrolling, on my timeline, and I see something, and it's like, oh, well, I think of something just to compare, like either, oh, I'm better than that person, or, oh, I'm worse than that person. And like, those are two things where it's just like either or, it's not good to think about. And it's just making sure that you spend your time doing the right things. So getting in my Bible, I've never been very good at actually diligently doing that. I've always been good at going to church or listening to podcasts or things like that. But I've never actually been good at sitting down and getting in the habit of doing a daily devotional or getting in my Bible. And that's something I've been working on during this COVID situation, is making sure my habits are good right now. So later on, they don't, I guess, I just fall off a cliff or something. So I'm just making sure I'm getting in those daily kind of habits.
So I'm jumping off our script here a little bit, and this might get
Okay.
me in trouble. I beg your forgiveness later. But as you've been doing that, is there anything that has stuck out to you? A devotion that stuck out to you? A Bible story that stuck out to you as you've been kind of getting into it right now?
One thing I say that I heard, that I've been reading and hearing is just choosing to be joyful. Like I've always thought, like I've always wondered, what's the difference? Like, why do people find happiness in life? Like, how do people find happiness in life? Why are some people fulfilled, some people aren't? And the biggest thing I think between happiness and joy is happiness is fleeting, but like when it's talked about in the Bible, like joy is a fruit of the spirit. So joy is everlasting. And so I think like just having the fact that we can choose joy and choose that in a difficult season rather than just in a good season. And so like during this Corona COVID season, people could be getting down about certain things. And I know people have lost almost like their senior year of sports, which I possibly can have imagined. And that would be so difficult. And I know it would, it would really suck and just having that happen to you. But the fact that like that's not your final story, and the fact that you can choose joy and looking at things in a different perspective would allow you to then be able to impact the environment around you. So that's probably the biggest thing that's been sticking out to me.
That's awesome. And you were kind of answering the next question I was going to have for you about encouraging others during this COVID-19 time. But yeah, I agree. And the one thing that's always stuck out to me about the happiness versus joy, happiness is so dependent on the external factors around you, right? If something happens, you have a really crappy day, right? I have a 1 and a 3-year-old. When they're waking up, my happiness is impacted, let me tell you. But you're right that the joy is something that no matter what through that time, I'm still joyful about the call that God has in my life, the role of a father, that's stuff that is joyful and isn't going to change, right? But the happiness can sometimes be impacted by those external things. So good insight. So was there anything else too that you were going to share about just with seniors or with students right now in the COVID thing, or did that kind of capture what you wanted to share with them?
I guess one more thing I would say is John Maxwell, if you guys don't know who he is, but he's considered the #1 leadership coach in the world. And so he's spent years and years developing his leadership ability and capacity. And I heard him say this a couple of weeks ago on a short video. He said, life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so, and maybe those numbers aren't perfect, but maybe they are. And so but the whole idea of it is, what is your perspective about the situation that you're in, and what are you choosing to look at it through a negative lens or through a positive lens? Because I can pretty much guarantee you that a negative lens isn't helping your situation, and that viewing it in a positive light or in a positive way, even if it doesn't better your situation right now, but the way that just your mindset will react to future situations down the road is a big key. And viewing every obstacle or challenge as an opportunity to grow or to become better is something that has helped me. So when going through something that I might not like, I choose to think of it as an opportunity to grow in that area. And so whether or not that's the right way to do it, it's just what I do. But someone could take that little piece of advice and maybe apply it to their current status.
Very good. Yeah, it's I guess that'll be tested here. It sounds like we're going to hear from the governor soon here about what may happen with this stay-at-home order. So we'll get to choose how to react to that situation here.
Yeah.
That into practice. Very good. Well, I know you've got something else that you want to share, a devotion for us today. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Take it away.
Okay. So something I kind of have on my heart that God has been working through me in these past couple months is I call it the 3 Ps. So I kind of have been searching about what I want to finally do with my life, and I've had ideas, I've had opportunities to do different things, but actually making a decision and acting upon it is different than just thinking about it. And so for me, I've found that I want to build my life on 3 different Ps. So the 3 Ps are purpose, passion, and persistence. And so the reason I was kind of in a devotional actually, and like these 3 just like popped up out of like one of them popped up, and then later I was reading a book and then that one popped up. And then so I just found these 3 Ps to be kind of the pillars that I want to build my life on. And so the first one, purpose, is know your why. So what is your purpose on this earth? So if you don't know right now, that's okay. Like I didn't know for a long time, but I would be seeking God for that and trying to find out your purpose and your why. And don't get discouraged if you don't know or if it doesn't come soon, but just have that as a mental thing for you. And then passion. So once you know your why, you can then choose something to be passionate about to help your kingdom purpose that to move you forward. And so that passion will help you when you face difficult obstacles. And so that 3rd P, persistence, is just staying the course no matter what. And so just because God tells you to do something, or just because you feel like you should do something, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But dialing in and realizing that his purpose for you doesn't only affect you, but it actually affects everyone you come into contact with. And so that's what one thing I've been dealing with recently is I've been feeling maybe a little bit lazy on my purpose, or maybe not as passionate about it. But then once I realized, like, that's kind of selfish. Like my whole life isn't just revolved around me and what I do, but it's revolved around helping other people succeed and choose to do what they need to do for his kingdom. And so realizing that my purpose, passion, and persistence actually affects my environment to help the other people choose their purpose, passion, persistence, it's a ripple effect. And you don't know the amount of ripples that you're going to make in this world, but just knowing that at least you're doing it to affect others. And just also something that I've learned over this past year is just seeking godly mentors and seeking people who have success of where you want to be in life. And one question I was asked about a year ago around this time is not what do you want to do, but how do you want to live? And so through this past year, I've been kind of having that thought in my head. Like you always hear the question when you're little, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, like what do you want to be? But how do you want to live? Like how do you want your life to be remembered? And how do you want your legacy? What do you want your legacy to say about you after you leave? And so people like godly mentors, these people should help you, like hold you accountable and to help you stay on the track to be the best person you can possibly be. And just finding those right people in your life and sticking to them and sticking to the purpose, passion, and persistence that God has planned for you. That's what I kind of got for today.
Mac, that's awesome. I think those words ring so true, whether you're a coach who's watching this, or a parent, or another adult or student. As you're discerning, it's a great question to ask is, what's your why? And it's amazing to me how often what God has planned for our life aligns at times with our passions and with our why, right? I mean, we're created. God created us all in this unique way with these certain passions or these certain strengths, right? And it might be a career that we didn't think about. It might come out of nowhere, but when you really get into it, you can see God at work. And so it's always awesome to be asking that question, just like you said, what's your why, right? And you know, it also, I think, kind of keeps us grounded and reminds us, you know, why we do what we do. So I love it. As a coach, you ask that all the time after a few losses or after a rough practice. What's your why? Well, because we love kids, right? Or we love athletes. And I'm sure you ask that question at times as an athlete too. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, Mac, thank you so much. I got one more question for you before we wrap up. So you talked about your transitioning into your professional career. So what is that? What's next for you come on the horizon?
So what's next for me is I'll be working for a consulting company here in the Twin Cities. And so I'll be sent to a corporate office of a financial firm, and then also being an entrepreneur. And just being able to help people. That's the biggest thing that I want to do in life, is being able to help other people succeed. And something that one of my mentors has taught me is that even if you're not going at what you want, but as long as you help enough other people succeed, you'll find yourself ending up succeeding. And so even if that's not your main goal for you to succeed, but as long as you're helping others, that'll eventually come to you. Because as long as you're pursuing God's will, and doing his path, like he wants to bless you, you know? And so just realizing that and taking those blessings, but also helping those around you receive their blessings as well. That's kind of one of my biggest goals in life. And so that's where I'm starting off my journey this coming summer.
Awesome. Well, I want to pray for you to close. I thank you so much for your words today. And you blessed me as much as I hope you have blessed the people that have been watching and or will watch this later. So thank you so much for your time, and let's pray. Lord God, I thank you so much for Mac, and just for the example that he sets, that he is setting, and that he has set, whether it's his playing career and his college career, or now as he gets ready to transition. I just pray that you bless him, bless the way that he lives his life so that he can continue to be an example, and ordain these next steps for him, because some of this may be a little bit unknown, starting a new job, a new career. And so I just pray that you let that calm nerves and walk with him as he goes throughout the next step of his journey. Be with us all here as we continue throughout our week and into the weekend. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Zach,
Thanks
for
everybody.
having me.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks everybody